Dr. Carson, thank you so much for taking the time. You're a pretty hot number these days, you know.
My pleasure.
Dr. Carson, you are now probably the runner-up in most polls and gaining on Donald Trump. Explain to me why you feel that you're connecting with people.
Well, I think people are actually having an opportunity to hear the words that I'm saying, as opposed to the words that certain members of the media say that I'm saying. And, they can actually see that, what I'm talking about is logical, commonsensical things that aren't necessarily Republican or Democrat talking points, but really are directed at solving the problems that affect us, because there's so many people who are incredibly concerned about our future, and they don't see anything being done about it except talk.
Doctor, when you and I first talked, one of the things that I suggested to you that you were so soft-spoken and so nice, it would be a liability. It now appears to be a strength. The NBC described your ascension in the polls as a, quote, quiet surge. Do you think your demeanor is helping you?
Well, I think it does in the sense that, you remain cool, calm, and collected. And, you deal with the issues as opposed to just dealing in an emotional way and dealing in the way that most politicians deal with things, with sound bites that sound good. People are so tired of that, and, they're looking for real substance.
Doctor, as a sign of how formidable you are becoming, Donald Trump is finally directing some of his firepower towards you. He recently said, and I'm quoting him, "Doctors can't create jobs," close quote. To that, you say what?
To that, I would say that's actually false. We've managed to create quite a few jobs, not only in the medical arena, but through our national scholarship program. And, of course, I sat on the Kellogg board for 18 years, Costco board for 16 years, chairman of the board of Vaccinogen. I've been out there doing lots of things, but to be honest with you, of all the things that I've done, the thing that, gives me perhaps the greatest satisfaction is intervening in the life of a child and giving them not only longevity but quality of life. I believe that is perhaps one of the greatest things a human being can do.
Doctor, I was really impressed when you went down to Harlem and you had a bunch of street press conferences. And one of the things you talked about was the implosion of the family. Back in 1965, when Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote his famous report, 25% of black families were born outside of wedlock. That number now is over 70%. And Obama said that a kid growing up without a father is 5 times more likely to be poor, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. Why do you suppose so few Republicans are talking about this?
Well, I'm talking about it.
You are. I know you are. But, I mean, your fellow Republicans, why has the Republican Party been AWOL about what I consider to be this crisis within the black community?
I believe that for the large part, they've kind of written off that community. But, when you're not in it as a politician and you're looking at how do we resolve these problems so that we give people quality of life, that's when you begin to really address these issues. And I'm hopeful that by my doing it, some of the others will, begin to really look at these issues and recognize that, they affect our entire population. We only have 330 million people. And we're competing against China and India, who have over 1 billion each. We can't afford to lose any of our people. We need to cultivate all of them.
Mm-hmm. Doctor, let's talk about Kim Davis, the clerk of court in Kentucky. As you know, she refused to issue a license for a same-sex couple, spent 6 days in jail. As we speak, she has now been released. Do you think that she had a right to refuse to issue a license to a same-sex couple?
Well, I think what we really need to be asking ourselves is, what are we going to do to keep this from being a repeated problem? Mm-hmm. Because that's what it's going to be. Because of the ruling by the Supreme Court, you now challenge the validity of the First Amendment. And the reason that we have a government set up the way it is if something like that ever occurs, the other two branches are supposed to step in immediately and rectify the situation. Congress is AWOL. They need to be creating legislation right now to protect the First Amendment rights of every American, because it's very clear that this is going to become a huge problem.
Some people, Dr. Carson, likened what she did to Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on the bus. Do you think the comparison is well taken?
Well, bear in mind, when she took the job, the Supreme Court had not made that ruling.
Right.
And therefore, I believe there's an obligation to try to accommodate her. And what she has asked for is that her name be taken off the documents because she does not approve of same-sex marriage. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's an unreasonable request. Mm-hmm. And what we're going to have to do as a society is learn to sit down and both sides sit down, put your arguments on the table, and let's try to come to accommodation. This my way or the highway stuff just doesn't work. And so often it's the thing that precedes, bloodshed.
My guest is Dr. Ben Carson. Dr. Carson, immigration, of course, has become one of the central issues in the campaign as a result of Donald Trump. Donald Trump wants to deport all the illegal aliens in the country, even the illegal parents of kids who the Supreme Court has deemed to be in the country legally. What is your position on illegal immigration? What would you do about it?
Well, first of all, you can't even talk about immigration until you control the borders, and we certainly have the ability to do that. We just don't have the will to do it. And then, in order to stop the flow, you have to cut off the goodies, including employment. And if that doesn't exist, there would be no reason for people to come. Now, the ones who are already here, we have to find a reasonable way to deal with them. Rounding them all up and sending them back. It sounds real good. It's a good red meat type of statement. The problem is it's not practical. Mm-hmm. It's going to clog up, the legal system for years to come, cost incredible amounts of money, and then end up not being done anyway because everybody would be so frustrated. So instead, let's just say we allow them a mechanism to become guest workers. Doesn't give them citizenship, doesn't give them voting rights. But they have a certain period of time in which they have to get registered, pay a back tax penalty, and pay taxes going forward. The reason that's important is I was talking to a farmer in South Dakota recently, 8,000-acre farm. He starts his workers out at $11 an hour. He said he couldn't hire one single American, not one. Mm. And I've had other farmers tell me the same thing. And I've had hotel owners tell me the same thing. We have to recognize that you don't just, pull out a part of the fabric of a foundation and expect everything to be okay. You have to use a little bit of logic in the way that you do this. So allowing them to become guest workers doesn't give them voting rights or citizenship is the way to do it. And that's assuming that they don't have a criminal record or some other reason for deportation.
We come back, we continue my interview with Dr. Ben Carson, and I talk about how he became a national figure after he essentially dissed Obama at the National Prayer Breakfast when he turned to Obama and said, instead of Obamacare, we should have health savings accounts. All that's coming up. I am Larry Elder. Don't leave town. Dr. Carson, you became a national celebrity. You were already well known because of your books, but became a national celebrity when, during the National Prayer Breakfast, you turned to President Obama and suggested, rather than Obamacare, we address the issue of health care with health savings accounts. For a while, Republicans were talking about repealing Obamacare. I don't hear Republicans saying that anymore. Why not?
Well, you'll hear me saying it. Mm-hmm. I can't speak for everybody else. But, you need to put something else in its place. And using a health savings account system, in which we pay for with the same dollars we pay for traditional health care, is a very wise way to put the care back into people's hands. And the adaptation I would make is giving people the ability to shift money in their health savings account within their family. It would give you enormous flexibility to cover almost anything that comes up. And drastically decreases the cost of catastrophic insurance, since the only thing coming out of that would be real catastrophic health care.
Mm-hmm.
That takes care of 75% of the people in a much better way than we're taking care of it now. But there's still a quarter, 80 million people, that doesn't take care of. That's way too many, by the way, and we would take care of them by fixing the economy. That's another topic.
Mm-hmm.
But right now we do have 80 million. And how do we take care of them? We take care of them with Medicaid. Medicaid budget is $400 to $500 billion a year. 80 million into 400 billion goes 5,000 times. $5,000 each man, woman, and child. What could you buy with that? A concierge practice,
Mm-hmm.
boutique practice, and still have a couple of $1,000s left over to buy catastrophic insurance. I don't suggest that we do that. I'm saying that's how much money there is.
Right.
So we could certainly give them health savings accounts also that they have control over, even though the people in Washington would say you can't do that because they're stupid and they wouldn't be able to manage it. But they said the same thing about food stamps. They would be able to manage it. Would learn very quickly not to go to the emergency room with that diabetic foot ulcer and pay 5 times as much as it would cost to go to the clinic. You go to the clinic, get it taken care of, and they say, let's get your diabetes under control so you're not back here in 3 weeks with another problem. A whole nother level of savings, which we as a society are not realizing. Plus, we're teaching that person to take personal responsibility for their health. We need to be focusing on things that cause people to take personal responsibility, not things that cause people to be dependent.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Carson, Congress is now coming back, and there's a fear that there may be another government shutdown, and that will be a black eye in the Republican Party. But when I look at the budget and I look at the entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and then debt on the interest rather on the debt, you're talking about 70% of the budget right there. And then you throw in the majority of what's left, which is defense. You're talking about maybe 15% or so, which is what Congress fights over all the time. If we don't do something about the 3 major entitlements programs, aren't we just fiddling around with the edges?
No question. I mean, when you look at the fiscal gap, which are the unfunded liabilities, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, all the governmental programs, versus the amount of money we're expected to bring in through revenues, that gap now sits at over $200 trillion. It has to be paid at some point. It's a house of cards that's going to fall down. The only reason we can sustain it is because we can print money, and I don't know how long that's going to last, because that's a privilege that generally goes with the number one economy in the world, which we were from the 1870s until last year when China became. So, we've got a certain grace period. We're going to have to get our act together. Dealing with entitlement reform is part of it, but a bigger part of it is stimulating that economic engine, the greatest economic engine the world has ever known, which is now fettered with untold regulations. There's almost no industry or anything that's not clobbered with all these regulations now. And every single regulation costs us in terms of goods and services. That disproportionately hits the middle class and the poor. And it's one of the reasons that the income cap is being driven. You'll never hear Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton talking about that, but that's one of the things that's really killing people. Mm-hmm. And then our tax system is just ridiculous. That does not encourage entrepreneurial risk-taking or capital investment. Those things have to be fixed.
Speaking of taxes, Dr. Carson, Donald Trump recently said he wouldn't mind paying more in taxes. Is that the problem? Rich people are not paying enough in taxes?
No, that's not the problem at all. The problem is that we have a system that is completely unfair. Now, it is true that there are a lot of rich people, who, buy fancy lawyers and accountants and find all kind of loopholes and ways to get out of paying their fair share. There's no question about that. But that's not the majority of rich people. Mm-hmm. So I think that's an unfair statement. But what we need is a very fair system that hits everybody proportionally, and that's what I've advocated. You make $10 billion a year, you pay $1 billion. You make $10 a year, you pay $1. You get the same rights and privileges. What could be more fair than that? You get rid of all the loopholes, all the deductions. And that would be a truly fair system. It would be simplistic, and it would help us to limit the scope and size of the IRS, possibly even be able to eliminate it. Those are the kinds of things that will really spur on the economy. You look back at our history. How did we go from nowhere to the pinnacle of the world, and the highest pinnacle anybody ever reached in record time? It was because we created the right environment. Believe me, that kind of ingenuity and innovation still exists. The hard work the ethic. It is still here, but you have to create the environment.
The DNC recently adopted a resolution supporting the so-called Black Lives Matter movement. What do you think of the Black Lives Matter movement?
I think people are being used and manipulated. I think it's very unfortunate. Obviously, Black Lives Matter, and every life matters. And what I would like them to do is maybe add the word all. They say all Black Lives Matter, including all of those babies who are being slaughtered. The number one cause for death in the black community is abortion. Does that matter? And number one cause for death for young black males in our major cities is homicide. Do those lives matter? Because most of them are not occurring at the hands of the police. You know, let's talk about the things that are really destroying that community. Let's talk about the crack houses, the drug dealers that are really wreaking havoc. Let's talk about a school system that is failing the population and turning out people who are not capable of being successful in our society. You know, these are the things that are really hurting us, and we have to stop allowing the purveyors of division to rule and to have people at each other's throats. You know, we're civilized people, and you know, are there rotten police? Of course, there are rotten police. There are rotten nurses. There are rotten teachers. There are rotten bus drivers. But we don't go out and try to kill them all. That doesn't make any sense.
I'm happy you didn't say there. I'm happy you didn't say there are rotten talk show hosts.
I started to, but I decided to spare you.
Dr. Carly Fiorina has suggested that when people say, "Would you take the VP position?" she called it sexist. Would you consider it demeaning if somebody were to ask you, "Would you settle for VP?"
I don't think it's a demeaning question. That certainly is not why I'm in this. And, you know, my answer to that is my standard answer, and it is all things are possible. But that certainly would not be my intention.
Foreign policy, real quickly, Doctor. What would you do about ISIS?
Well, first of all, you have to recognize that the global jihadist movement has a goal of destroying us and destroying our way of life. Unless you understand that, then all of your responses are going to be inadequate. And that's exactly what's going on right now, inadequate responses. We need to use every resource available to us, including financial resources, covert and overt resources, all of our military resources, to destroy them before they destroy us.
Doctor, thank you so much for taking the time. I can't let you go without one gotcha question. I've noticed you no longer wear glasses. I used to wear glasses for a long time. I had laser surgery. Did you have laser surgery, or now are you wearing contacts?
No, I had cataract surgery, and now they have the ability when they take cataract out to put a perfect lens in. So that's why I don't need my glasses anymore.
Well, Doctor, thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.